Good evening to everyone present in this class today. We're Team 5 and our paper was a really intriguing one which questions the concept of Guanxi, defines it and further goes on to elaborate on its classifications and implications. Relationships are everything in China. While you're building and nurturing your business and relationships, you may be asked to share stories and information of a surprisingly personal nature. Guanxi is perhaps best understood by the old axiom, it's not what you know, but who you know that's important. Guanxi in the West comes in many forms, namely alumni networks, fraternity or sorority memberships, past and present places of employment, clubs, places of worship, families, and friends. Despite the growing interest among both academics and practitioners in the West, the concept of Guanxi is not much questioned and there is considerable confusion about its implications for businesses. This paper explores the nature of Guanxi by using a multiple definition approach. It defines Guanxi as a process of social interactions and argues that the existence of Guanxi base does not produce Guanxi necessarily. The paper classifies Guanxi into three categories: family, helper, and businesses, and it critically examines the role of Guanxi in business. The paper has also drawn up some important conclusions. First, the potential benefits of Guanxi as mainly tactical rather than strategic. Second, Guanxi as a personal asset cannot be a source of competitive advantage. Third, the Guanxi between a business person and a government official is inherently corrupt and ethically questionable. Fourth, as Guanxi has an impact on the wider public, it should be studied in context of all stakeholders. And lastly, it is more than likely that Guanxi's role in business will eventually diminish as China moves towards a more open market system. Seen from the outside, Guanxi is complex and defies definition. Guanxi is closely intertwined with the Confucian philosophy, a philosophy that has shaped many Asian cultures. That self is extended to family, friends, and society to create a harmonious community. Guanxi implies an obligation that one has to another. In China, it is stated that the wheels of a business are lubricated with Guanxi. As no word in English has the exact meaning, it is best left untranslated. A Chinese character may have different meanings when it is used as a noun or a verb or used with another character to make up a phrase. Of the two characters that make up the term Guanxi, the first character Guan as a noun literally means a pass or a barrier, and as a verb means to close. The second character Zhi as a noun means a system and as a verb means to tie up or link. The term Guanxi in the Chinese language has multiple meanings. It could refer to one of the three things. Firstly, the existence of a relationship between people who share a group status or who are related to a common person. Second, actual connections between frequently contacted people. And third, a contact person with little direct interaction. However, in everyday communication, Guanxi has a pejorative connotation, referring to the use of someone's authority to obtain political or economic benefits by unethical individuals. In social sciences, Guanxi is similar to some concepts understood in network theory, such as the idea of information or connection brokerage by well-positioned individuals in social network or their social capital. Traditional Chinese societies was predominantly rural and built around families. Confucianism and dominant cultural belief emphasize the interdependence of social connections. Business and societal relationships relied more heavily on networks of trust and mutual obligation than on strong codified laws. In the existing literature, Guanxi is commonly defined as a special relationship two individuals have with each other. To Jacobs, Guanxi means connectedness or particularistic ties. To Gold, Guanxi is a powerful relationship as one's control over valued goods or access to it gives power over others. Osland adds on that a special relationship between a person who needs something and a person who has the ability to give something is what Guanxi means to him. All these definitions are useful as they depict Guanxi as special relationships. However, this is just one side of the coin. How does Guanxi distinguish itself from other relationships? Guanxi are delicate fibers woven into every Chinese individual's social life and therefore into many aspects of the Chinese society. In the literature, there have been various definitions for the concept of Guanxi. For example, King in 1989 stated that Guanxi is kind of an interpersonal relationship. He also pointed out that Guanxi in Chinese society is built by the social interaction between individuals and established based on common shared attributes such as kinship, locality, workplace, sworn brotherhood, being classmates, a common surname, or a teacher-student relationships. Moreover, in terms of management studies, Chen in 2004 also defines Guanxi as an informal, particularistic personal connection between two individuals who are bounded by an implicit psychological contract to follow the social norm of Guanxi, such as maintaining a long-term relationship, mutual commitment, loyalty, and obligations. Although the cultivation of Guanxi has become the focus of researcher attention only since the decentralization and privatization of Chinese economy, its roots are deeply embedded in 2000 years of the Chinese culture. According to Confucianist philosophy, the individual is never an isolated, separate entity. All humans are social or interactive beings. Although Guanxi was not found in the Confucian classics, the word lan was used. The concept of lan concerns the differentiation of individuals and the kinds of relationships to be established between individuals. Confucian social order is constructed upon the concept of lan. In the simplest terms, Guanxi is a special relationship between two individuals. We've already mentioned that multiple times before, but we're going to be emphasizing on it again. But how special or close this relationship is depends on the nature of the relationship itself. Everyone in China lives in a web of social relationships. People's family, kinship networks, colleagues, neighbors, classmates, friendship circles, or even casual acquaintances are the social communities into which they grow and on which they depend. These are much closer in social structures to individuals than is the state party. The social relationships which surround an individual provide immediate expressive and instrumental support that the larger structure of the state government does not. Rationally, individuals cultivate and utilize social connections in order to satisfy personal interests. In exchange, they are obliged to assist others with whom they are connected. This implies that the government officials at various levels often deliberately break party rules by assisting those people with whom they have a Guanxi. Because Guanxi is a social force which encounters bureaucratic control, the use of Guanxi decreases when the bureaucracy is very strong. On the contrary, the effectiveness of interpersonal networking can deflect bureaucratic control over jobs. In a relation-centered world, social relations are accorded much greater significance. Relationships are often seen as end and of themselves rather than as means of realizing various individual goals. As part of the emphasis on differentiated relationships, attention to others is highly selective and mostly characteristic of relationships with in-group members. Many observers in Chinese social relations have noted that in comparison to the West, Chinese have a much stronger tendency to divide people into categories and treat them accordingly. This tendency of treating people differently depending on one's relationship to them constitutes the basic reason why Guanxi is such an importance in Chinese society. Contrary to the conventional definition, a Guanxi process can be started between two people who do not share a Guanxi base between them. This Guanxi process, compared with the Guanxi with a base, may be difficult to start or takes a longer time, but it is not uncommon. The two parties may discover or build Guanxi base between them during the process. In short, relationship, that's the Guanxi base, may exist as a matter of fact, but Guanxi is an action taken deliberately for a specific purpose. As the Chinese saying goes, nobody would visit the Three Treasure Temple without a good reason, or the party who initiates the process would normally say, I wouldn't come in to bother you if there wasn't something coming up, for which I needed your help. The motive is to find a solution for one's problem to get the things done.
This slide explores Guanxi as a connection. In business, Guanxi can be referred to as connections used to open doors for new business and facilitate deals. A person who has a lot of Guanxi will be in a better position to generate business than someone who lacks it. The odds of gaining access to a business opportunity and then winning that opportunity are higher when you work with your connections. If you are bidding for a contract or competing with others and you know someone on the other side of the deal, naturally you will try to utilize this contact to your advantage. In the West, similar connections are created in alumni networks, fraternities, or sorority memberships, past and present places of employment, clubs, churches, families, and friends. In other words, Team 5 could be referred to as a mini Guanxi network. Guanxi can also be referred to as a form of irregular trade of favors between persons based on enduring sentimental ties, in which enhancement of public reputation is the hopeful outcome. Affection, emotions, and human depth are some of the intangibles traded in the Guanxi process. The Guanxi exchange usually starts with two parties, but may have more parties involved later during the process. There is neither a fixed rule nor specific value for which or what is being exchanged and when the exchange will be completed. It all depends on the circumstances and the relative position of the parties involved. The whole process is informal, complicated, and non-transparent, which may create uncertainty in the process as the outcome of the exchange is not always predictable nor what the parties expect. Guanxi possessed by a foreign firm may provide a source of competitive advantage for doing business in China. This guarantee is stored in the personal relationships and contacts maintained by staff or associates of an organization. It is completely up to these individuals to decide in their personal capacities how to bring the benefits to the firm, since guarantee can only be transferred from person to person and not to the firm. Employers in China tend to consider the guarantee hierarchy of any prospective employee and its impact to its pool of human resources before making a hiring decision. Guanxi could also act as an insurance policy, hence, just as maintaining a savings account for a rainy day is important, so is creating and maintaining Guanxi relationships in China. Each exchange of favor will add or subtract on the balance of favor. This slide introduces a major departure from the literature. Firstly, it stresses that Guanxi is a dynamic process which begins with two persons but may involve more parties at later stages. As a relationship, strong or weak, Guanxi exists all the time, but Guanxi as a process has a beginning and an end. According to this definition, Guanxi can only start when there is a need for something to be done for the first party, which triggers the Guanxi process. Secondly, in a Guanxi relationship, the second party in most cases may not have the solution, even though he or she is willing to grant a favor. Hence, that party must search further connections for the solution. This is exactly what Guanxi means. In such cases, the second party plays the roles of a facilitator, intermediary, or matchmaker rather than that of a solution provider. Thirdly, a Guanxi process involves a series of activities, mostly pre-planned and carried out between two or more parties in the Guanxi network. According to this slide, Guanxi can be placed into three classes. We have the family Guanxi, helper Guanxi, and business Guanxi. In the family Guanxi, members are connected by blood relationships and exchange love and affection, and mutual dependence is the final derivative of this relationship. It usually extends from extended family bonds. The helper Guanxi, on the other hand, has a social base that helps to distribute favor with the aim of growing the social status of its members. Some examples are benefits gained from social connections, school friends, members of common clubs and organizations. It is customary for Chinese people to cultivate an intricate web of Guanxi relationship which may extend in huge numbers and various directions. Staying in contact with members of your network is not necessary to bind reciprocal obligations. Reciprocal favors, on the other hand, are key factors in maintaining one's Guanxi web, while failure to reciprocate is considered an unforgivable offense. On the flip side, in the business context, Guanxi occurs through individual interactions first before being applied on a corporate level. China is a country where business relationships are highly socially embedded. Hence, Guanxi plays a central role in shaping and development of day-to-day business transactions by allowing inter-business relationships and relationships between businesses and the government to grow as individuals representing these organizations work with one another.
In looking at business Guanxi, the remaining section of this presentation focuses on its nature, the alleged benefits and ethical implications. It delves into the unpredictable role Guanxi plays while operating a business, partly due to the fact that the three types of Guanxi previously mentioned are intertwined in reality. Here, we look at Guanxi as a kind of personal possession or an asset owned by an individual, which works only at a personal level. At this level, an employee can only and at their discretion allow the organization they are working in to benefit from their Guanxi connections because it is the employee's personal property and not an organizational asset. In this instance, when the employee leaves, they can take the Guanxi with them. It can further be divided into two types, namely business to business, which is the B2B, and business to government, which is the B2G, depending on the parties involved. So for the B2G Guanxi, it says if one party in the relationship is a business person and the other is a government official, it is termed B2G. So B2G Guanxi represents a way to bypass laws and regulations through personal connections with government officials and to obtain special treatment or scarce resources. B2G Guanxi appears to be the predominant form of business Guanxi in China. So that will be the focus moving on, where it is believed a major benefit of this Guanxi is to obtain information on government policies, market trends, and business opportunities. A case cited in the article says that a chairman of an Australian company who was seeking investment opportunities in China had a good relationship with a local executive of a large state-owned enterprise who was friends with a key government official in Shenzhen. And during the negotiation process, the executive continuously fed the chairman with relevant information needed for the project, which eventually led to a successful negotiation outcome. But what was not mentioned were the favors the chairman of the Australian company returned to the Chinese official and the local executive, making the process of obtaining that information ethically questionable. Next, we take a look at the exaggerated benefits of Guanxi. The role and benefits of Guanxi have been grossly exaggerated and cannot be substantiated in existing literature. According to the article, there has been no convincing direct evidence to show how and to what extent Guanxi alone is beneficial to business performance. It further goes to debunk Guanxi as the most effective or cheaper option to making things happen in the long term. According to a survey conducted by the Hong Kong Independent Commission Against Corruption, it estimated that Guanxi accounts for up to 5% of total cost in doing business in China. So the idea of Guanxi cutting transaction costs were not validated, as heavy reliance on Guanxi to the point that cultivation and maintenance of the Guanxi network consumes much of a firm's financial and managerial resources. These expenses and risks may outweigh the potential benefits such Guanxi could generate. Also, looking at the intended benefits of a Guanxi transaction, which is not delivered immediately after the payment, in some cases such delivery may never arrive. The article calls it a futures transaction with an unspecified time, quality and value of the proposed benefit delivery. So it begs the question, does Guanxi reduce or increase uncertainty? Moving on to the fallacy of Guanxi being seen as a competitive advantage. Now, we all know that not all assets have strategic values. For an asset to be considered strategic, it must create competitive advantage, be rare and difficult to imitate. The article notes Guanxi lacks in this context because a Guanxi asset can lose its worth or turn into a liability, especially if one party, for example a government official, loses power or is facing corruption charges. It is also worthy to note that Guanxi as a personal asset owned by an individual makes it mobile, volatile and difficult to sustain. In this instance, a company that has a high turnover rate will not be able to benefit from an employee's Guanxi because the minute the employee decides to leave the job, they take their connections with them. The last point on this slide notes that Guanxi relationships are not exclusive and can be copied. What this means is that an outsider or a newcomer can develop new Guanxi or penetrate the rival's network by using intermediaries and financial incentives. Though it may take time, money or effort, it can happen, hence not making Guanxi relationships utterly exclusive. Looking at Guanxi and corruption, this slide shows a relationship between money, Guanxi, power and corruption. In the Chinese society with a long tradition of rule by man instead of rule by law, it has always been vital to have good Guanxi with officials, and this special Guanxi relationship between a business person and an official is aptly termed in Chinese as venal Guanxi, which is known as the deal between power and money, where Guanxi is the common factor that ties them up. Hence, there is no B2G Guanxi network that is not tainted by corruption, and no corruption without using Guanxi. According to transparency.org, it notes that the weakness in the market structure and an inadequate legal system, combined with a lack of transparency due to the absence of political opposition and media scrutiny, have allowed Guanxi to contribute greatly in making China top of the league table of the most corrupted countries. It was also noted that today, B2G Guanxi is linked to big corruption cases and organized crimes. Corruption can be found in any country or economic system, but it is Guanxi that provides the fertile soil in China for corruption to flourish. In the past 3 years, China executed more than 20 high-ranking officials, including a vice chairman of the People's Congress and a few ministers, the first in the 52 years history of the People's Republic. Recent big cases are a smuggling ring in Fujian province and custom frauds in Guangdong province, with estimated values of $80 billion and $20 billion respectively. So is Guanxi ethically acceptable? And to what extent do we use it and how? What is the comparison between family and helper Guanxi and B2G Guanxi? Family and helper Guanxi are generally considered good Guanxi, that is totally moral or even desirable, which causes no harm to outside parties. But on the other hand, B2G Guanxi can be ethically questionable. Guanxi has been noted to bring personal gains to individuals, resources and safeguards to the organizations that employ them. But these benefits are often achieved at the expense of other individuals or firms, as B2G Guanxi, seeing that it creates significant disadvantages for companies outside the network, which can stifle competition and is detrimental to the whole society. So what then is the role of Guanxi in the future for international businesses moving into the Chinese market? For international companies doing business in China, Guanxi is an important consideration mainly at the initial stage, which is the introduction, negotiation, and setup of operation. A re-evaluation of the Guanxi relationship established at the initial stages should be assessed as soon as the business is up and running in order to determine if it will be profitable to maintain over time. This is mostly because Guanxi and the role it plays will be changed while international firms move down the learning curve in the Chinese market. Ultimately, it is not Guanxi but high-quality products, good marketing strategy, together with an effective supply chain that makes businesses successful in the Chinese market, just as it would be anywhere else in the world. In conclusion, Guanxi is a unique Chinese social concept based on its cultural values as well as political and socio-economic systems that it cannot be studied alone from economic or financial perspectives. Guanxi has so far been studied mainly at a personal level, and seeing as Guanxi transactions have a much wider impact on the public than the Guanxi parties concerned, the consequences of Guanxi should be examined in the context of all stakeholders and at three levels, namely the personal, organizational, and societal level. A study into how Guanxi affects the firm's performance and what ethical consequences a Guanxi Act has on other stakeholders can be looked into. Further research into the understanding of Guanxi's role in managerial decision-making will help Western partners in foreign-funded enterprises develop better relationships with their Chinese counterparts. These can be taken into consideration as shedding more light on this subject could be vital in the further pursuance of this subject. Although a limitation which is due to the backstage culture of Guanxi, people will be reluctant to share their trade secrets with an outsider, unless the researcher succeeds on being accepted as an insider, should be taken into consideration while pursuing further research into this topic. In understanding Guanxi's implication in the Canadian context, any Canadian liaison must critically understand the Guanxi approach, seeing as this will open doors and create pathways and reduce the possibility of culture shock that could emanate in the process of doing business in China. Guanxi can create a conflict of interest or moral impediment because of its exchange of favors. It can lead to a new bilateral agreement that favors Canadian manufacturers. There must be a show of appreciation to the intermediary who brought the deal to fruition, or the Canadian government will owe him a favor that could be called upon at a future date to reciprocate. In doing this, it's to be able to create and maintain trade agreements between Canada and China. In linking Guanxi to a Canadian firm, my teammates and I chose Lululemon. China is one of Lululemon's most important markets. In 2016, Lululemon unrolled its yoga mat and opened the doors to its first 2 stores in mainland China in Shanghai and Beijing. Each store is designed to reflect the community in which it opened. While all 4 stores offer Lululemon's full assortment of innovative, technical athletic apparel and its personalized guest experience, the aesthetics, events, partners, and ambassadors are unique to each individual store. According to the company's 2019 annual report, China was its 4th largest market in terms of outlets. It now has more than 38 stores across the country, including Hong Kong.
Applying the understanding of Guanxi to Lululemon's market in China could very well help the Canadian brand expand its operations and better penetrate the Chinese market. Lululemon faces tough competition from other major brands like Nike and Adidas, which have already been well established in the country now for decades. To remain relevant and outperform the major competitors, Lululemon will need to have to build strong relationships in China at its initial market penetration stage in order to improve the quality, capacity, and supply chain reach. Yoga is becoming increasingly popular in China, and Lululemon should be able to capitalize on its demand. Yoga International even dubbed China the new yoga superpower, with more than 10 million Chinese consumers practicing yoga regularly. Lululemon can increase its popularity by partnering with influential yoga studios, instructors, and other exercise establishments in China. The right kind of Guanxi will make the identification of these institutions and adoptions of Lululemon products by all relevant stakeholders within a breeze. Roughly 67% of Lululemon's products are manufactured in China right now, and remaining 33% in other countries. Manufacturing is a very expensive endeavor. Many moving parts and efficiencies must be considered always for any corporation to maximize profits. Adopting some elements of business to government, Guanxi could assist Lululemon avoid plant closures due to the strong relationships they have built within the supplier and work union representatives. A good understanding of intricacies of Guanxi system in the Chinese market could be the catalyst to launch the clothing brand into becoming a colossal in this market. Thank you for listening to our presentation and sticking till the end. We would like to extend our gratitude to the professor for providing us with this opportunity. We now open the floor to any questions you guys may have.